Welcome back to another episode of the Beeman Show. I think we have a pretty interesting program for today. We're going to be taking a look at the sun, that big orange thing that's up in the sky. We're going to be talking about sunspots. And we're going to take a look and see how the sunspots have an impact on winter weather in our area. So we know the Earth is on an axis, so in the winter we get a little less direct sunlight, and how the sunspots indicate an increased activity or a diminished activity. And then we're going to take a look at some paperwork. I got some charts and graphs and stuff, several documents here. We're going to take a look at those. And we'll see about some historical weather events. And I think that once you see this, you'll never be able to unsee it. And just before we get started on that, I got a little clip I'm going to play for you of President Trump back in 2000 when they had another round of fires. And President Trump went out and he is trying to talk to them about doing proper fire mitigation techniques. And they weren't having it. They just wanted to talk about global warming, and Donald Trump throws them this little nugget. So here you go. Here's this nugget from Donald Trump in 2020.
You to really recognize the changing climate and what it means to our forests, and actually work together with that science. That science is going to be key. Because if we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting Californians.
Okay, it'll start getting cooler. You just wait.
Well, did you ever wonder how come it's every 10 years some other global warming catastrophe is about to befall all of us? The oceans are going to flood in 10 years. All the icebergs are going to melt. The polar bears are all going to starve in 10 years. The Greenland ice cap will be gone in 10 years. Florida will be underwater in 10 years, They know a little something they're not telling you. And we're going to take a look at this 10-year solar cycle that they all know about. They know that the weather pattern will change within 10 years. So they always make these 10-year predictions. When you see this, you won't be able to unsee it. So let's get right into it. Here we go. And so here we have a little bit of the solar sunspot data and some correlation between how sunspots and other things going on in the earth at the same time seem to have a cooling effect in the winter. So if we look right up in here, in London, England, the Thames River froze over. It didn't get above freezing between December 27th and February 7th. They had a 3-day ice party on the river. It was froze solid. And where were we? We're right here, right in this area. You can see the dip. This graph shows high levels of sunspots and low levels. It kind of runs in a cycle over 10, 11 years. You can see that there was a huge diminishing between 1800 and 1814, 1816, 1818. Now, this also goes along with, remember Napoleon, who got froze out of the Russian winter? That was right there. Look how low it was. 1812. And it was the winter of 1813 and 1814 that the Thames River froze over. And everybody's heard, the History Channel with a year without the summer. That was 1816. Look how low the solar activity was. What triggered this? This was pretty bad. People ended up starving to death because of it. So lower sunspot activity, lower solar activity, yeah, it does bring about a cooler winter, but it's not the end all be all. It's a 1-2 punch. A 1-2 punch that triggered in 1815 is what triggered the year without the summer, where hundreds of thousands of people ended up starving to death. They couldn't plant food the next year. In 1817, 1818, thousands and thousands and thousands of people starved to death. It was a giant volcanic eruption in Indonesia. An entire mountain exploded like Mount St. Helens did, but 4 times bigger. And 10,000 people were killed in the explosion. It was so big. This is what ended up triggering this. Now we'll look at a little bit more of this chart here. We can see throughout the 1800s this relatively low activity, and how does that correlate into the winters? Well, here's some snow totals out of Boston. 1886, 1887 winter, 81.6 inches. Here is 1898, 1899. That's a spot right on the chart. 72.5 inches. 1899 to 1900 is right in here. It's kind of a low spot with only 32 inches of snow. 1905 to 1906, 61 inches. 1914, 1915 winter, 20 inches. 1920, 88.5 inches. And then we get up and we start seeing this chart is going up, and there's more and more sun activity. So we hear that, this correlation between the number of sunspots does warm the earth up slightly. And we saw 36 inches of snow in 1950, 31 inches of snow in 1960, 57.2 inches in 1970, 30 inches in 1980. And so after 1980, if you remember, in 1970s, those of you that are old enough to remember, we had a lot of snow in the 70s, and then towards the end of the 80s and the 90s, it really started to diminish off. In 1990, just threw some of these numbers in there, 36 inches. 2002, 2003, 23 inches. 2021, 21 inches. 22, 54 inches. 2023 is 11 inches of snow. 2024, you guys should remember these because we lived through these. 15 inches of snow. And here comes this giant anomaly in 2015. 108.6 inches of snow. And what events happened in 2014 that might have that same correlating effect as the eruption in Indonesia? Well, in Japan, 9/27, Japan 2014, Mount Ontake eruption. Then again, November 23rd, Mount Fogo eruption. And then Iceland, an eruption starting on August 29th, continually erupting through February 27th in Iceland. In 2014 and early 2015, which triggered this 108 inches of snowfall. So there's a correlation between sunspots and a cooler winter. We can clearly see them here in this chart. We see that the chart itself shows us the fluctuation in the lower number of spots and how it increases. And we have a little warmer winter, so we get a little more rain than snow. But we see it's not the only factor. Volcanic activity in the atmosphere reflecting back light from the sun is the big factor that brings in this 108 inches of snow. It kicks Napoleon out of Russia. It freezes the Thames River. It makes a year without a summer where thousands of people starve to death. So what we're looking at right now is we're going to take another look at the trend going forward for the next 20 or 25 years is going to show an increasing diminishment in solar activity. So here we have a chat with ISES. They're an organization that does science, and they put out this information, public information. And you can see here in this chart for the 2000s how we really started to warm up in the 2000s. And 2010s we were warm, 2020s, and we've been warming up, having these warm summers and milder winters right up until we got a really normal winter this year. Because we're right at the peak. We should be at the peak, but still the peak is still under what we had seen. So it dropped down a little bit in the 2010, 2011, 2012, where, we didn't really get a lot of the colder winters. And then now we see the forecast going forward. Our trend is to come down. So we're going to see a diminished activity. So that's another 10-year cycle, 11-year cycle. So what I'm saying is that the trend looks like more snowy, more colder winter seasons. And if we get somewhere in this zone, some big volcanic eruptions, we could really be in for a hard winter. Yeah, so I know this chat here, this one here, is which one we finished up with. But, you see that it's 2030. That chat runs out to 2030. It's another 5 years. So we're about halfway through this cycle. I think, looking at the data, what we got for snow in the past and how these volcanic events can have an impact, like a 1-2 punch, where we're in a diminished solar cycle and then we end up having, a volcanic event, and the combination of the two can really, really pile the snow up. But either way, we're headed in the down cycle of this 2030 that we're going towards 2030. And, this year we got a more normal winter outside. And we should expect, not that every year is going to be a lot of snow, but we should anticipate going forward for the next 5 or 7 or 8 years that we will more than likely see more snow. It's not a guarantee, but if we do have some major volcanic event, you can guarantee we're going to get hammered, because the data, we looked at the data, we saw the snowfall totals, we saw where it really jumped up high, 108 inches, 3 major volcanic activities in the northern hemisphere in the latter 3 months of the year. Then Iceland went all the way through until the next year. So it's just very, very interesting. And I hope you enjoyed this little information I put together for you. I hope you enjoyed the program today. Thank you for watching. And remember that you are the John Pullens. You are the candle holders. So please subscribe and share this broadcast with many people as possible and help it to be a success. Thank you. God bless.